Hello, I want to do a quick tutorial on a few common problems I see on websites with paragraph text. The first I wanted to point out is paragraph alignment. Now I'm just doing this in Illustrator as an example to be able to show you what I'm talking about here. But a lot of times I see people post center aligned paragraphs, which would look something like this. Now, for when you have a lot of body text, this becomes a little bit problematic. The reason why is the edge of your text curves and moves depending on how much is in that given line. So what happens is this makes the text a little bit harder to read. This usually isn't ideal, especially, and it also has a tendency to leave little widows down here, like little pieces of text. You know, you'll have a big line here and then just a little bit there, and it creates some odd shapes sometimes. Sometimes you can get away with it if you don't have a lot of text. If you just have a couple lines of something, you know, for a caption or something, that might look okay. The more square you can get it, usually the better. Of course, you could go to like a full justify, but depending on what you're doing, a lot of times that creates what's called rivers through the text, and that doesn't look too good. This looks okay in this case, but most of the time I found justifying full, where it's straight on both sides, doesn't work that well. Right align can work sometimes. Again, you sort of have this ragged starting point of when you read each line, so that makes it harder to read as well. Right alignment sometimes can work good if you have a photo over here and you want a nice clean edge next to it, and also when there's not as much text or you have some kind of bullet list, or I usually use the right alignment a lot for addresses and contact information, because I can run that down the side, I could put a photo next to it, and everything will square up nicely. Left alignment is really going to be your best bet in most cases. The reason why is you can line up with a grid where you're lining up with your navigation, with your logo, and all that stuff can be in a nice straight line. So left alignment is going to work best for you in most cases. So I would go with that most of the time. It's not a hard rule. Sometimes you can get away with different layouts, but most of the time your readability will be best that way. Another problem I see commonly is the length of paragraphs. This actually is a little bit wide, perhaps a little too much. So what happens is especially when you have a large amount of text, you're reading through, you read this line and then your eye has to jump back to the next line. Well, the longer this line of text is, the harder that's going to be. Let me just stretch this out to, the wider and wider this gets, the harder it's going to get. Usually it's good to keep things a little bit tight. I've seen different guidelines, but possibly around 10 words per line. So this top line, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is 12. Once you get up to kind of like more than 12, 15, things get a little bit too wide and it gets harder to read. So especially when you have large bodies of text here, don't let your paragraphs get too wide. So if you're doing a website and you have a completely liquid layout, you got to think some people might have large browser windows, so if they had one as big as this screen, that liquid layout's going to create text that looks like this, and this is going to be very difficult to read. So what you have to do is you have to put this text within a div box that has a set width. Now you still can have a liquid layout where this box is going to flow depending, your box of text is going to flow depending on how you set it up in the layout, but this div box itself is set to 500 pixels, 600 pixels, whatever we're talking about here, and then that allows it to have the best readability. Finally, one last thing I see a lot is text that goes right up on the edge of their layouts, or even the side of their browser windows. This also isn't a very good idea. Really, text is going to be readable if it just has some margin space, a little bit of breathing room around it. When you get right up on the edge, it just doesn't create a desirable look. Or sometimes I've even seen it like sitting on the edge, and that's not good either. So in most cases, you want to have a little bit of margin space to where you've got some space on the left, you got some space on the right, top and bottom. You know, when you separate things this way, that extra space will just make your information quicker to read, quicker to find the parts of the paragraph that the person's going for, or if you have headlines in between, it just breaks up the content in a good way. It's called chunking, where you break up content so that it's a little more handleable. One other quick tip too is make sure that your paragraphs don't get too long. For example, if you had a super long paragraph like this, it's going to be much harder to read than if you broke this up into paragraphs that will, it's just a little bit less overwhelming when someone comes to a page that has a lot of content and a lot of text.